she left a single note. Not a memoir, not a final interview, not a statement crafted for public consumption, just a handwritten letter tucked among her most personal belongings, waiting to be found only after the world had already said its goodbyes. When the people she trusted most with the truth finally read what Barbara Hale had written, they understood that the woman millions believed they knew had spent her entire life carrying something extraordinary, something she had chosen to hold close not out of shame, but out of a devotion so complete that no camera or journalist could have ever done it proper justice. Barbara Hale came into the world on April 18, 1922, in DeKalb, Illinois, born to Luther Ezra Hale and Wilma Colvin Hale, and the family eventually pulled up roots and resettled in Rockford, Illinois, where she spent the years that formed everything she would later become. Growing up against the backdrop of the Great Depression, she absorbed lessons that no classroom could have delivered, learning what it meant to keep moving when the ground offers nothing, to carry responsibility for the people around you without expecting recognition for it, and to build a kind of quiet resolve that does not need applause to sustain itself. Those years in Rockford left their mark on her in ways that wealth and fame would never undo, and anyone who knew her well enough could see those Depression-era roots embedded in the way she carried herself through every decade that followed. Her early ambitions pointed toward the visual arts, and she enrolled at the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts in Chicago with a genuine sensitivity to how light and form communicate what words often cannot. Had things gone the way she originally planned, she might have spent her life working with canvas and paint. But fate rarely follows a tidy plan, and her physical elegance and natural poise drew the attention of the modeling world before she had finished mapping out her future. Modeling opened another door entirely, and through that door came Hollywood. RKO Pictures signed her in the early 1940s, and those first years on studio lots meant small roles, frequently uncredited, the kind of entry-level work that tests whether someone has the patience to grow slowly or only the appetite for immediate recognition. Barbara had the patience, and she treated every minor part as though it carried the same weight as a lead, because for her, commitment to the craft never depended on how large her name appeared in the credits. Films like Higher and Higher in 1943 and The Window in 1949 gave audiences early glimpses of what the industry was beginning to understand, that she possessed a rare ability to make viewers believe they were watching a real person rather than a performance, and that quality would only deepen with time. Over the decades that followed, she appeared in more than 50 feature films and shared the screen with some of the most celebrated names that American cinema produced during its golden era, including Frank Sinatra, Robert Young, and James Stewart. Directors valued her not simply for technical skill, but for something harder to manufacture, an authenticity of feeling, a sincerity that could be felt through the screen rather than just observed. The Boy with Green Hair in 1948, Jolson Sings Again in 1949, and Lorna Doone in 1951 each added another layer to an already serious body of work, and each revealed her ability to inhabit different kinds of characters without ever losing the warmth that made her distinctly, unmistakably herself. Television, though, gave Barbara Hale the stage that matched her fully, and when she was cast as Della Street in the courtroom drama Perry Mason in 1957, opposite Raymond Burr, the show found the cultural weight that would hold it there for nearly a decade. Perry Mason ran until 1966 and became one of the most beloved legal dramas in the history of American television, the kind of program that people scheduled their evenings around and spoke about at work the following morning. What set it apart was never simply the cleverness of its plotting. The real engine of the show was the partnership between Perry Mason and Della Street, and the specific way Barbara filled that role with something the television of that era rarely allowed a woman to be. Della Street operated as a full working partner in every case the show dramatized, not a decoration, not a romantic subplot, not someone waiting to be rescued or guided. She anticipated complications before they arose. She moved with confidence through situations that would rattle most people, and she brought an intelligence to her work that the show never once treated as surprising or exceptional. because Perry Mason took her competence entirely for granted, the same way a person takes gravity for granted. And Barbara played her with a precision and warmth that made Della feel genuinely admirable, someone the audience trusted without having to be told they should. In 1959, after 2 seasons on the air, the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Drama Series went to Barbara Hale, confirmation from the industry of what audiences had already decided for themselves. Raymond Burr, who played Perry Mason with the kind of commanding presence that fills a room simply by existing in it, was in private a man of real complexity, intensely private, emotionally layered, and frequently misread by a media that preferred its simplified version of him. Barbara knew the actual person, and she had known him from the earliest rehearsals, when the show was still finding its footing and both of them were still discovering what this particular partnership was going to become. Their friendship did not develop cautiously the way many professional relationships do. It arrived with an ease and naturalness that both of them recognized immediately as something worth protecting, and they protected it for the rest of their lives. Between takes, they talked at length. Through difficult shooting days, they steadied each other. Across the years and then the decades that followed the original series, they became something the entertainment industry rarely produces despite all its manufactured closeness, a genuine constant in each other's lives. When Perry Mason concluded in 1966, the connection between them held without effort, and when both were reunited starting in 1985 for a long series of Perry Mason television movies, more than 30 films spread across a decade, they returned to each other's company the way people return to a conversation that was simply interrupted rather than ended. A new generation of television viewers discovered Della Street and Perry Mason through those later films, and Barbara brought the same investment to those performances she had brought in 1957, never treating the material as a comfortable victory lap, always approaching each film as its own obligation to the audience watching. None of that changed the fact that Raymond Burr's health began to fail in the early 1990s, and when it did, Barbara stayed close with a loyalty that required nothing in return and asked for no recognition. He died in 1993, and something in Barbara grew quieter after that, though she continued to show up for her life in every way the world could see. What she felt at his loss was not something she ever discussed in public. She held it, the way she held most of what mattered most to her in the private space where her truest self had always lived. Barbara Hale passed away on January 26, 2017, at her home in Sherman Oaks, California, at 94 years old, and the cause was complications from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, a condition she had faced in her final years with the same quiet fortitude that had met every other challenge of her long life. The entertainment world responded with grief and admiration, tributes arriving from colleagues and fans and historians of the medium, all of them reaching for words adequate enough to describe the weight of the loss. Most landed on the same qualities: grace, dignity, warmth, professionalism, and an integrity that never bent to an industry that bends nearly everyone eventually. Found among her personal belongings after her death, the note had not been prepared for the public, had not been shaped into a posthumous statement or a contribution to any legacy project. She wrote it for her family, for the people who loved her and who deserved to know the full truth of what had shaped her most deeply. "Raymond was my rock," she wrote, "and he gave her strength when she felt uncertain, and he believed in her when she doubted herself. There were days," she admitted, "when she leaned on him more than she should have, and he carried her through the long hours, through the doubts, through the stretches when she wondered whether she still mattered in Hollywood." Those sentences, written in private and never meant to travel beyond the people who already loved her, carried more honesty than decades of carefully managed public appearances had ever allowed. Behind that composed and professional surface Barbara always presented, real uncertainty had lived, real moments of doubt had occurred, and the friendship she shared with Raymond Burr had functioned as genuine emotional bedrock during those harder stretches. "Ray had a gentle soul," she wrote. and behind the powerful voice and the intensity of his performances there lived kindness, humor, and a deep loneliness that most people never saw. She had seen it, and rather than explaining it away or trying to fix it, she had simply stayed present and steady in the way that only the truest friends manage to hold. "When Ray left us, something inside me went quiet," she wrote, and she still heard his voice every time she walked onto a set. That particular kind of grief, the loss of someone woven into the fabric of every working memory you carry forward, is different from ordinary loss in ways that are difficult to explain to someone who has not experienced it, and Barbara described it with a plainness that made it felt rather than just understood. What the note ultimately gave the world was language for a kind of love that fits no simple category. Barbara was clear on this, leaving no room for misinterpretation. It was not romantic love. What it was, instead, sat older and, in its own way, more lasting than romance. The love between two people who had been honest witnesses to each other's lives, who had seen the private person behind the public performance, and had chosen, again and again, to remain. "I think we loved each other in the truest way," she wrote, "not through romance but through the kind of loyalty that does not fade. Ray was family. He was not just Perry to Della, he was part of our lives. Her son, William Catt, who built his own acting career across film and television and became best known for starring in the 1980s series The Greatest American Hero before later appearing alongside his mother in the Perry Mason television movies, confirmed everything the note expressed. He described Raymond Burr as a fixture of his childhood, someone who showed up with warmth and generosity, someone who felt in every meaningful sense like an extension of the family. The bond between Barbara and Raymond reached past professional courtesy and settled into the domestic rhythms of her home and the ordinary days of her family's life together. That home had been built with Bill Williams, the actor born Herman August Wilhelm Catt, whom Barbara married on June 22, 1946, after meeting him the previous year on the set of the Western film West of the Pecos. Their connection during filming was immediate, their courtship unhurried and honest, and the values they discovered they shared required no explanation between them. Devotion to family, belief in hard work, and a preference for substance over the glamour that surrounded them on every side. Nearly half a century of marriage followed, lasting until Bill's death in 1992, and across those decades they raised 3 children together, daughters Jody and Juanita, and their son William, who would carry both his parents' love of performance into his own career and find his own audiences in the process. Barbara turned down roles when they conflicted with her responsibilities as a mother, and she made that choice without visible regret and without any apparent sense that something more important was slipping away. She understood, with a clarity that not everyone manages to reach, that the roles she played on screen were simply not the most significant ones available to her. A mother, a wife, and a friend, she devoted herself to all 3 with the same full attention and sincerity she brought to the camera, and the people around her felt that devotion in ways that no award could have quantified. From the girl who grew up through lean years in Rockford, to the young woman who trained as an artist before finding her way into one of the most celebrated careers in American television history, Barbara moved through her entire life with a consistency of character that stands as the most striking thing about her. Fame did not alter her fundamental nature. Loss did not break her. The relentless exposure of an industry that profits from private lives never reached far enough to touch what she held most dear, and she remained, across 9 decades of a life lived fully and honestly, exactly who she had always been. When the note reached people beyond her family, and its words began to settle into the wider world, what moved through the conversation around her legacy was not shock and not scandal. What moved through it was something far rarer, the feeling of recognition, of finally seeing the complete shape of a life that had always seemed admirable, but now revealed itself as something more, a life organized entirely and without apology around love for her craft, for her family, for the enduring friendship that had carried her through more than 30 years of work alongside a man whose depth the world never fully grasped, but whom she had known and cared for with everything she had. "If I could speak to Ray again," she concluded, her words settling into a simplicity that needed no elaboration, she would simply say thank you for every word, every laugh, and every moment they had shared in the story of their lives. Those are not the words of someone reaching for recognition or working through regret. They are the words of a woman who knew exactly what she had been given and exactly what she had given in return, and who carried that knowledge quietly, the same way she had carried everything that mattered, without performance and without need for an audience. Barbara Hale did not leave behind a scandal. She left behind the truth, offered simply and without ceremony, in the same manner she had moved through every single day of her long and extraordinary life.